week we talked about our God's thoughts and how we need to adopt the mind of Christ. Tonight I'm going to be talking about sinful thoughts and how we need to surrender our sinful thoughts to Jesus. So I'm going to start by asking you guys a question. You guys don't have to answer it out loud, but definitely think about it. Do you guys struggle with sinful thoughts? I already know the answer to that because everybody experiences sinful thoughts. Even if people try to say, oh no, like I'm so holy, I don't experience those at all, they're lying to you. Everybody experiences sinful thoughts. There's not a single person that doesn't, because sinful thoughts stem from our sinful nature, and we human beings are sinful beings. So that includes myself, so I'm going to tell you guys a little story. So when I was in 5th grade, my family life was not so good. My parents' marriage just wasn't in the best place, and so I was on the brink of losing my family. And I remember just thinking, like, I go to church, I pray for my family, like, why doesn't God come through? And so these thoughts of doubt started filling my mind, like, is God really going to come through? Is God really going to answer your prayers? Like, you've been praying all the time. Do you really think he's going to answer them? Do you even think he's listening to you? And so I was having these doubting thoughts and just not so good thoughts about God in general. And so these thoughts were on my mind 24/7, and it was getting to the point where I literally only thought about the bad in God, or just thought badly of God. I was like, why isn't he coming through for my family, and why isn't he answering my prayers? And so for a couple months, I suffered or struggled with these thoughts, and I just thought to myself, like, maybe it's me, like maybe I'm the problem. Why am I having these thoughts? Like maybe I'm a bad person because I'm thinking this way, or because I'm having these thoughts. But the reality was that everybody had those thoughts. I just didn't know. So because I felt so shameful because of the thoughts I had, I didn't share them with anybody. And I struggled for about 3 months just with these thoughts and not sharing them with anybody. And finally it got to the point where I thought, okay, I need to talk to someone because I just can't handle this by myself anymore. And so at the time, my mom was growing in her relationship with Jesus. She was flourishing, and I knew that I could go to her because she was strong in her faith. So I started talking to my mom, and the thing she told me was to pray, to take every thought captive, to pray over your mind, pray over your thoughts. And so I did just that. I would go home and I would just pray over my mind. I would pray for a sound mind. I would pray for godly thoughts. And it didn't happen overnight. I still continued to have those thoughts, but they weren't as bad as they were before. And so after I surrendered those thoughts fully, I didn't have them anymore. And my parents, actually, their marriage was saved. And so I was able to get to a place of just kind of being like, okay, so when I surrender these thoughts to God, good things come from it. I'm not going to be able to fix them on my own. So this is why it's important that we surrender. So an intrusive thought is something that is unwelcomed or unwanted. It can be an image, a thought, or an impulse that just randomly pops into your mind unexpectedly. Our thoughts can be destructive, especially when they're sinful thoughts. And when we entertain these sinful thoughts, they can lead us down a path that God doesn't have intended for us. And it can even pull us away from God and the relationship that we have in him. The first scripture I'm going to share with you guys is from Psalm chapter 139, verse 23 through 24. And it says, oh, thank you. Okay, can you guys hear me better? Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting life. So chapter 139 from Psalms, it's a prayer from King David. You guys may recognize this name from the story of David and Goliath. But another story that he's well known for is his story with Bathsheba. So I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit about that story. So essentially at this time, David is the king of Israel. His men are at war, and he was actually supposed to be at war with his men. However, he stayed behind. And one day when he was roaming his palace, he came upon a woman who was bathing, and her name was Bathsheba. And when he saw Bathsheba, obviously he saw things that he shouldn't have been seeing. And so his mind was filled with these thoughts of lust and desire, these sinful thoughts he was having. And so when he saw her, he went to one of his men and he was like, who is this woman? Who is this woman? I need to know who she is. Like, who is she? So upon asking him, he told her, oh yeah, that's Bathsheba, Uriah's wife. And so what King David should have done is like, oh, she's married. He should have turned away from that. He should have stopped looking at her. He should have walked away, and he should have surrendered those sinful thoughts he was having to God. But rather than doing that, he continued to entertain those thoughts, and it led him to lust, to lie, and to have an innocent man killed to hide the sin that he committed. Despite King David doing these actions, one thing that stuck out to me was that he was the anointed king of Israel. God had anointed him specifically to be the king. And even though he was anointed king, he still continued to struggle with having sinful thoughts. And it made me think, we often see people in higher positions, such as pastors or even leaders, as people who are perfect. Like, I know for me, I look at some of my friends who maybe have been in the faith longer than I have, and I'm like, man, like there's no way they can't be messing up in life. Like there's no way that they can't have sinful thoughts. But the reality is that everybody has these sinful thoughts. I have these sinful thoughts. Every person in here has these sinful thoughts. So despite King David falling into sin and giving into his sinful thoughts, he still came back to God. And we can see that through his prayer in chapter 139 of Psalms. He's asking God to renew his heart, to search his heart, and to find anything that may be sinful. And this prayer should be an invitation for us to do the exact same thing. We can pray and ask God to search our hearts, to search our minds, and to search our thoughts for anything that may be displeasing to him. Oftentimes, when we have these sinful thoughts, they can creep up on us. We don't even realize our minds are wandering to these places until, bam, these thoughts are in our head. And it's like, okay, where did this come from? It may be thoughts about ourselves, thoughts about others, or maybe thoughts about things that we may want to do. So I have a few questions that I want to pose for you guys. You don't have to answer them, but maybe write them down or take a picture and just think about them when you're alone spending time with Jesus. The first question is, what are some thoughts that are constantly on your guys' minds? Are they thoughts of worry, fear, maybe jealousy, resentment, anger, lust, pride, or greed? The second question is, what are these thoughts, or when these thoughts are on our minds, how do they affect us? So do they make us mean or bitter? Do they make us angry? I know when I was having these thoughts, I often got easily agitated with people, and it wasn't their fault. I just was getting really upset that I was struggling with the thoughts that I was having, so I took it out on other people around me. My mom would just simply ask me, hey, what do you want for dinner? And I'd snap, I don't know. Like, I would just give her attitude for no reason. The third question is, when we're having these thoughts, how do they affect our relationship with God? And do they pull us closer to him when we have these thoughts? Do we think, okay, I need to pray, I need to dive into the word, I need to lay these thoughts down? Or do we pull away from God? Do we spend less time with him? And do we not spend time in the word as much? The second scripture I wanted to read to you guys is from Mark chapter 7, verse 20 through 23. And this is Jesus speaking in this verse, and it says, and then he added, okay, it is what comes from inside that defiles you. For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these vile things come from within. They are what defile you. When I read that scripture, I honestly didn't know what defile meant. I was kind of confused, so I had to look it up. So to defile means to make something foul, dirty, or unclean. And when I found that out, I was like, so Jesus is basically telling us that everything that makes us foul, dirty, or unclean, everything that defiles us comes from within us. It is us that does it to ourselves. It comes from within our own hearts. And it kind of took me back to the saying of, everyone experiences sinful thoughts because we are sinful in nature. So it comes out of us because we as human beings are sinful. In the scripture, it says, from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts. So when we're having these sinful thoughts, it's coming from the desires of our heart. So it almost makes us question, well, what's in my heart? If I'm having these thoughts, what is it in my heart that is causing me to have these thoughts? The biblical definition of the word heart often refers to the seat of the mind, will, and emotions. So basically, the heart is kind of like the security guard for all these things. So if our heart's corrupt, our emotions, our will, and our mind is going to be corrupt also. This is why it is so important that we guard our hearts and we guard what we're allowing to influence us and what we're allowing into our lives. If I'm doing things that I shouldn't be, if I'm spending time with people that I'm not supposed to, or I'm watching things I shouldn't be, those are the things that are going to influence me, and those are the things that I'm letting into my heart. So what Jesus is teaching us in this scripture can also be applied to the sinful thoughts that we may be wrestling with. Jesus is revealing to us a truth that it's important for us to all understand, and that is we all have sinful thoughts that all come from a sinful nature. We all have thoughts of immorality, lust, greed, pride, anger, and envy, whether we'd like to admit it or not. I know for myself, I don't like to admit that I have certain thoughts because it's like, okay, well, if I'm thinking this way, like I'm a leader, I almost feel shame in a way because if I'm at this position, why am I thinking this way? Why am I not transformed yet? I've been in a relationship with God for how long now, and I'm still thinking this way. It is very important that we purify our hearts. We alone are not able to purify our hearts. We need help, and only Jesus can do that. Last week, we talked about the need to adopt the mind of Christ, and it is all possible for every single one of us to have the mind of Christ. We're the only ones that stop ourselves. The only thing that is stopping us from adopting the mind of Christ is when we begin to entertain the sinful thoughts that we may be having. It's when we entertain these thoughts that we fall into sin. Sometimes it may seem as though whatever we're thinking about may bring us more satisfaction. Let's say I'm thinking about, I don't know, going out to eat and I'm going to eat a lot. The spirit of gluttony, it's real, it's out there. And so if I'm going out to eat a lot, yeah, it's going to satisfy me in the moment, but what about the stomach ache I'm going to have after? Or those 5 pounds I'm going to gain after eating all of it? It'll bring me temporary satisfaction. But the satisfaction that it's bringing me is taking away what I really need, and that is the love and the companionship of Jesus. Not only Jesus, but also the community around us. I'm going to use Izzy as an example. Izzy's one of my best friends. We hold each other accountable for a lot of things. And I know, like, when I'm doing something wrong, she kind of clocks my teeth. She's like, hey, what's going on? Like, what are you doing? And so one thing that we do is, one thing that we do is we share our locations with each other. And it's, yeah, part of it's for fun, like I just like to see where she's at sometimes, but it's also a way to keep each other accountable. So let's say, for example, I go off and I'm out doing something I know I'm not supposed to be, and I hide my location from Izzy, right? I'm pulling away from her. I'm stepping away from that community that is going to push me towards God, and I'm going to the community that's going to pull me away from Him. And so it's so important that we understand that sin separates us from God, but also from the community of believers that are going to support us and push us towards Him. This is why it's important that we pay attention to the thoughts that we may be having. If we realize and recognize, like, hey, my mind's starting to wander, like I'm not really thinking the way I should be, or I haven't been feeling right these past couple of days, it's important that we recognize that and turn those thoughts around. We can pray about it, we can surrender them to God, but the important thing that we should understand is that you cannot let those thoughts remain in your mind. It is very important to surrender them to Jesus. If prioritizing your mental health is something that you guys feel very strongly about and you guys really want to emphasize in your life, a tip I can give you guys is to not allow these intrusive and sinful thoughts to stay in your mind. A term, I don't know, it's kind of popular, but it's live in my mind rent-free, or live in your mind rent-free. When you think of a funny meme or you think of, something cool and it lives in your mind rent-free. Right? To live in your mind rent-free is meaning like you're allowing it to stay there no charge. It's just there and you're not getting rid of it. So it's important that we don't allow these intrusive thoughts, these sinful thoughts to live in our mind rent-free. We need to reject them, we need to surrender them, and we need to give our minds back to Jesus. The third scripture I'm going to be reading is from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. And it says, "We destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture their rebellious thoughts, and we teach them to obey Christ." So, I don't know, it's kind of a popular phrase, but you guys don't have to raise your hands. It's take every thought captive. That's something my mom told me when I told her I was struggling with the thoughts I was having. It's pretty popular within the church. When I imagined it, when she told me that, I kind of just imagined like a big fishing net being casted over my mind and over all of my thoughts, and Jesus just kind of coming in and scooping them all up and throwing them out. And I feel like that kind of helped me better, understand that He is taking every thought captive, and that when I give Him my thoughts and I surrender my mind to Him, He will come through and He will hear my prayers. And so the reason that this phrase is so popular is because it is the biblical application for how we can surrender our sinful thoughts to Jesus. We need to take every thought captive. So to take every thought captive, I also kind of didn't understand that too well, so I also kind of looked up the definition for that. And it means to you are actively choosing what to think about and how your thoughts are shaped. So rather than letting these thoughts wander aimlessly or dominate your mind, you're being intentional in what you're thinking about and what you're allowing to infiltrate your mind. So anytime that you guys may have an intrusive or a sinful thought, take a step back, pause, and pray. It doesn't have to be some crazy like 300-word prayer with all these extravagant words. It could be something so simple like, God, please give me a sound mind. God, please take over my mind. God, please take every thought captive. I remember when I was kind of going through it, I would just pray these simple prayers, and I felt so much more peace after because I wasn't doing it alone anymore. I wasn't having to carry these thoughts all on my own. We have direct access to Jesus through prayer, so don't think for a minute that you guys have to carry these thoughts on your own, because you don't. We can surrender them and give them to Jesus. He actually wants us to confess to him and ask him to purify our thinking. Like we learned in week 1, Jesus can change and transform the way we think. When I was going through struggling with these thoughts, I thought, okay, maybe this is just the way like I'm hardwired. Maybe this is just how I'm supposed to think. Like maybe this is just my mind. Like maybe it's something wrong with me. But that's not the case at all. Just like King David prayed and asked God to search his heart and search his mind and reveal anything to him that may offend God, we can do the exact same for ourselves. It's not impossible for God to change and transform you, no matter how much you think it is impossible. Nothing's impossible for God. So our main goal is to teach our thoughts to obey Jesus, right? Because Jesus wants to transform our minds, but it's us that has to give it to him. Jesus isn't just going to look at us and be like, you know what? I'm going to change your mind right now. We have to invite him. He wants us to give him control. He wants us to surrender to him. Something that I'm going to share with you guys that I wish someone would have shared with me is that we don't have to feel shameful or guilt for having these thoughts, because it's everybody that experiences these. I felt like such an awful person. I truly thought there was something wrong with me when I was having these thoughts. I was like, okay, like I gotta be going crazy or something. Like it just felt so awful, and I felt like I wasn't worthy of God's love or worthy of having a relationship with him because I was thinking that way. So don't for a minute think that there's anything wrong with you guys. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, but there's nothing wrong with that. We have to understand that everyone experiences these thoughts because it is a part of our sinful nature. This is why Jesus saved us, to sanctify us over time and to teach us to think how we think, and so that way we can adopt the mind of Christ. So every time you guys are going throughout this week and you're having maybe just these thoughts that you're like, okay, I know these shouldn't be here, question it, right? Call it out. Where is this thought coming from? Who is this thought coming from? What led me to think this way? Like, what thoughts was I having before this? Don't dwell on the wrong thinking and allow it to stay in your mind. Like I pointed out earlier, take every thought captive. Take a step back and pray about it. Even if you're out in public, like just, repeat a small prayer to yourself. Surrender that thought to Jesus and take every thought captive. So I'm actually at the last point of this message, but just to kind of sum it up, the point of this message is very simple. Everyone has sinned and therefore has a sinful thoughts. Because before somebody can go off and sin, they must have the idea or that desire first. So kind of like with King David, before he went and committed adultery with Bathsheba, he obviously had to have that desire for her first. He had to have those lustful thoughts first. When someone goes and rob a bank, they don't just go in and be like, hey, can I have the money? They think about it and they plan it out first. So before we fall into sin, it's the sinful thought that is in our mind first. And so in order to avoid falling into sin, we have to lay down those sinful thoughts to Jesus. The last verse that I'm going to share with you guys, it's one that Pastor JJ already kind of quoted earlier, and I thought I messed up by choosing this one, but I felt like that was just confirmation. It's from Romans chapter 12, verse 2, and it says, "Do not copy the behaviors and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." So I actually got through my message kind of fast, but I do want to share an encouraging word with you guys. If you guys are struggling with the thoughts you may be having, if you guys are struggling with these sinful desires and you just want to get it off your chest, but you feel so much shame to share them, please don't feel shameful, right? Like I mentioned, everybody experiences having sinful thoughts. You guys aren't alone. For the longest time, I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. It turns out everybody experiences these things the same way I do. So please reach out to someone. If you guys look around, there's a room full of people in here who are struggling the exact same way you are. You can even reach out to a leader, Pastor JJ, Cynthia. We're all here for you guys. Even if you just feel like reaching out to someone your age, there's a room full of people in here that are going through the same way you guys, or going through the same thing you guys are. So I just highly encourage you guys to share your burdens. You don't have to hold them alone, but most of all, surrender your thoughts to Jesus and just remember that you can turn to him at all times. And that's all I have. So thanks for listening to me, guys.